Okay, so let's set the scene. I want you to picture this. It's Christmas Day, the year 800 AD.
We're in Rome, inside the old Basilica of St. Peter.
And it's freezing cold. The air is just thick with incense and, a lot of unwashed bodies.
And kneeling in prayer is the king of the Franks, Charles, the man we know as Charlemagne.
Right. The most powerful man in Western Europe, a literal giant.
And as he gets up from prayer, Pope Leo III comes towards him.
And this is one of those moments in history.
It's the pivot point of the whole Middle Ages, you could argue. The Pope holds up this jeweled crown and places it on Charles's head.
And then the whole crowd just erupts.
Oh, it's clearly been rehearsed. They start this chant, "To Charles, the most pious Augustus, crowned by God, the great and peace-giving emperor, life and victory."
It sounds like a scene from a movie. The perfect ending. Barbarian king becomes Roman emperor.
But here's where it gets weird.
Yeah, this is the part the history books kind of gloss over.
Right. His own biographer, Einhard, who's a close friend, he claims that Charles said later that if he'd had any idea this was going to happen,
he never would have gone to church that day.
Not even on Christmas.
And right there, that's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Was this a genuine, spontaneous moment where Western Europe is reborn? Or was it just a piece of political theater?
Put on by a pope who was, frankly, desperate for a bodyguard.
And was Charlemagne's surprise for real? Or was he just playing a role, trying to look like he wasn't grabbing for power?
That is exactly what we're going to dig into. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Today we're tackling one of the giants of history, Charles the Great, Charlemagne.
And our mission here is to get past that statue of the father of Europe and find the real flesh and blood guy, because he is so much more complicated than the legend.
Oh, massively. He's a man of incredible contradictions. I mean, a 6'4" warrior who couldn't write his own name, but he's the guy who saves literacy in the West.
A deeply devout Christian who waged a 30-year war of terror and, massacred thousands of people in the name of his God.
He's the man who basically reboots the Western Roman Empire.
Let's start with just the physical man himself, because his sheer size, that was a huge part of his power, wasn't it?
It was everything. In an age where most people were, smaller due to poor nutrition, he was just enormous.
Einhard, his biographer, he describes him as large and strong and of lofty stature.
Right, and he gives that funny measurement 7 times the length of his own foot.
Which for a long time people just thought was, literary flair, making him sound like a biblical hero or something.
Yeah. But then, in 1861, scientists actually opened his tomb in Aachen.
They did, and what did they find?
They measured the skeleton and, it pretty much backed up the story.
No way!
Yeah. The estimate was around 1.92 meters. That's 6'4".
6'4" in the year 800.
Now, a more recent scan in 2010 dialed it back just a little to 1.84 meters, so just over 6 feet.
Still, even at 6 feet, he's in the 99th percentile for height. When he walks into a room, he's just bigger than everyone.
It's instant authority. In a warrior culture, that's an incredible advantage.
Einhard gives us other details, too. The round head, the big animated eyes, and I love this part, the thick neck and the prominent belly in his later years.
It makes him sound so real.
Yeah.
And the detail about his voice, that it was clear, but not as strong as his frame would have led one to expect.
You'd expect this huge booming voice, but he might have had a higher tenor voice.
It's just a great reminder that this wasn't some mythical figure. He was a person.
Speaking of myths, we have to talk about the beard.
Ah, yes.
The beard.
Every painting, every movie, he has this magnificent flowing white beard. Like Gandalf.
And it is almost certainly wrong.
So where did that image come from?
It's a later invention. People in the 12th century or the 15th century, they just assumed that's what a great, wise king should look like, a patriarch.
But the evidence from his own time tells a different story. It does. If you look at the coins minted during his reign, there's a silver denarius from Frankfurt. It shows him in profile, like a Roman emperor wearing a laurel wreath.
And on the coin,
no beard. He's either clean-shaven or, just as likely, he has a mustache.
A mustache.
Yeah, and you have to get the cultural politics here. The dynasty he replaced, the Merovingians, they were called the long-haired kings. Their long hair and beards were seen as the source of their power.
So by being clean-shaven or having a short mustache,
he's making a statement, a huge one. I am not them. We are the new management. The Carolingians favored mustaches and short hair. It was a total rebranding.
The mustache as a political power move, I love that.
It was.
And his daily life, it also tells you a lot about him. He was not a king who just sat around on a throne.
No, he was hyperactive, restless. He He actually built his main palace at Aachen because of the natural hot springs there.
Because he was a huge fan of swimming.
Right. Obsessed with it. Einhard says none could surpass him. But it wasn't just him doing laps.
No, it was a social event.
A huge one. He'd invite his sons, his nobles, his bodyguards, everyone into the water with him. Einhard says sometimes there were 100 people in the pool at once.
Wow. Can you imagine the power dynamic there?
Right. The king is there, basically naked, with all of his subjects, but he's still the biggest, most powerful guy in the room. Or, well, in the pool. It's a performance of vitality.
And that energy carried over to his diet. He loved his food.
Oh, he loved roast meat. His huntsmen would bring it right in on the spits.
And there's that great story about his doctors.
Yes.
Yes.
In his later years, he starts suffering from gout and other ailments, and his doctors tell him he needs to eat boiled meat. You know, it's healthier, easier to digest.
And he was having none of it.
Hated the idea. Einhard says he found the doctors almost hateful for even suggesting it. He basically said, look, I'm the emperor. I'll eat what I want.
A man who trusted his gut, literally.
He did. But for all that, he was very disciplined about alcohol.
Right. He hated drunkenness.
Abominated it. He'd drink wine, sure, but usually just 3 cups with his dinner. And dinner wasn't some wild feast.
What a class.
It was a seminar. He would have someone read to him while he ate, histories, theological works. His favorite was St. Augustine's City of God.
Now that choice of book says everything.
It really does.
City of God is all about building a perfect Christian society on earth to mirror the one in heaven. So he's sitting there eating this giant roast, listening to a blueprint for his entire reign.
Precisely. He didn't just want to be a conqueror. He wanted to be a builder. But he felt that to build that city of God, first, he had to conquer the world.
Which brings us to the violence. Because you don't earn the title the Great by being a good swimmer.
No, you get it by winning wars. And his reign started in a very dangerous place.
He wasn't the sole heir, was he?
He was not. When his father, Pepin the Short, died in 768, the Frankish kingdom was split right down the middle between Charlemagne and his younger brother, Carloman.
And they did not get along.
They despised each other. It was a deep, poisonous sibling rivalry. It looked like the kingdom was about to tear itself apart in a civil war.
And then?
And then, in 771, Carloman, who's only 20 years old, just dies. Suddenly.
Suddenly. Which in the Middle Ages is usually code for.
For poison, yeah. We have no direct proof of foul play. It could have been natural, but it was incredibly convenient for Charlemagne.
And did he mourn his brother?
He did not. He mobilized. He immediately marched into Carloman's territory, completely ignored the inheritance rights of his infant nephews, and just took the entire kingdom.
That's the ruthless streak right there. No hesitation.
None. And once he had a unified kingdom, he turned outwards. And we talk about him as a warrior king, but I don't think people grasp how constant the fighting was.
It was basically nonstop.
Out of a 46-year reign, there were maybe 2 years where he wasn't on a military campaign somewhere.
He goes south into Italy, crushes the Lombards, and crowns himself their king.
Which was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Suddenly, he's not just king of the Franks, he's an international power.
But they weren't all victories. We have to talk about Spain.
Ah, Roosevelt.
The story that became the great epic, the Song of Roland. But the reality was a total disaster.
An absolute failure. In 778, he goes over the Pyrenees, thinking he can take advantage of some infighting among the Muslim rulers there.
But it doesn't work out.
Not at all. The city of Zaragoza won't open its gates. He has to turn back. And as his army is snaking back through the mountain passes,
they get ambushed.
The rear guard gets completely cut off and annihilated.
By a Muslim army.
No, that's the later legend. It was actually Christian Basques, locals who were furious about the Franks looting their territory. They rolled boulders down the hillsides and just slaughtered them.
And among the dead was the real-life Roland.
Roland, the prefect of the Breton March.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how that complete humiliation was spun into this great tale of chivalry and heroic sacrifice.
It shows you how good he was at controlling the story.
He was a master of it. But the campaigns that really paid the bills, the ones that funded the whole empire, were against the Avars in the east.
Who were they?
Nomads on the Danube who had spent centuries raiding and hoarding treasure. When Charlemagne finally broke their power in the 790s, the amount of gold and silver that flowed back to Aachen was just staggering.
So that's how he could afford everything.
That's how he bought the loyalty of every bishop and count in his realm.
But the defining conflict, the one that really shows the darker side of his rule, has to be the Saxon Wars.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't a quick smash and grab. This was a 30-year meat grinder.
his Vietnam, as you said.
From 772 to 804.
Yeah.
The Saxons were this confederation of pagan tribes in northern Germany, and they were stubborn. They didn't have a king you could defeat or a capital you could capture.
So every time he thought he'd won, they'd just rebel again.
Every single spring. And because they were pagans, Charlemagne saw this as more than just a war for territory.
It was a holy war.
It was. The very first thing he does in his first campaign is march to the Irminsul,
Which was a sacred tree.
a sacred pillar, probably a massive tree trunk. The Saxons believed it literally held up the sky. It was the center of their cosmos.
And Charlemagne.
He chopped it down and looted all the offerings around it. It was pure psychological warfare. He was saying, your universe is broken. Your gods are powerless.
And as the war dragged on, things got uglier.
Much uglier. He just lost all patience. Which brings us to the massacre of Verdun in 782.
This is a really difficult event to get your head around.
It is. After another major Saxon rebellion, Charlemagne demanded the ringleaders be handed over. The Frankish annals say 4,500 men were delivered to him.
And he didn't imprison them.
No. On the banks of the Aller River, he ordered every single one of them to be beheaded.
4,000.
In one day. I mean, just think about the sheer logistics of that, the horror of it. The river must have run red for miles.
I know some historians have tried to argue that it was a mistranslation, right? That he relocated them.
That's a modern attempt to soften the blow. But the Latin is perfectly clear. Decolati. Beheaded. It was an act of pure, calculated terror designed to break their will to resist.
And then he followed it up with a new set of laws.
The Capitulatio de Partibus Saxoniae. And it is one of the most chilling legal documents you'll ever read.
What was in it?
It made being a pagan a capital offense.
You
Refuse
saw
to be baptized. Death. Cremate your dead in the old way. Death. Eat meat during Lent.
Death.
It was quite literally convert or die. Even his chief scholar, Alcuin, wrote to him saying, faith should be voluntary. You can't force it on people.
But Charlemagne didn't listen.
No, he chose force. And that's the man who is now the undisputed master of Europe.
Which brings us all the way back to Rome, Christmas Day, 800.
You can't understand the coronation without understanding that the Pope was in a terrible position.
This is Pope Leo III.
Right. Not a popular guy in Rome. He was accused of all sorts of crimes, perjury, adultery. And in 799, his enemies in the Roman nobility ambushed him in the street.
And this wasn't just a political attack. They tried to physically mutilate him.
They tried to gouge his eyes out and cut out his tongue to make him unfit for the papacy. He just barely escaped, bloody and half blind, and he fled all the way to Germany to find Charlemagne.
So Charlemagne comes to Rome not as a pilgrim, but as a judge, an arbiter.
He's there to sort out the mess. He holds a council. He clears Leo's name. He puts him back on the papal throne. The Pope now owes him everything.
And that leads us to the coronation.
The Christmas Mass. Charles kneels to pray, and the Pope makes his move. And as we said, Einhard claims he was totally surprised and furious.
Which just seems impossible. You don't just find an imperial crown lying around.
Or accidentally teach a choir a complex imperial chant that hasn't been used in the West for 300 years.
And there's another detail, isn't there? About his clothes.
The clincher. Charlemagne famously hated foreign clothing. He always wore his simple Frankish tunic. But on that day, Christmas Day 800, he was dressed in the full costume of a Roman noble. Tunic, clamots, sandals.
He was in costume for the part he was about to play.
He knew. So why pretend to be angry? Why tell Einhard he regretted it?
What's your theory?
I think the anger might have been real, but not about the title. It was about the act.
The choreography of it.
Exactly. By placing the crown on Charles's head, Pope Leo was making a powerful visual statement. I, the Pope, give you this authority. The church is superior to the emperor.
An idea Charlemagne would have hated.
Hated it. He believed his power came directly from God, not from the Bishop of Rome. And that single moment set up the central political conflict for the next 1,000 years of European history.
But let's dig into the why of it all. Why did they think they could do this? There was still a Roman emperor, wasn't there? In Constantinople.
There was. The Byzantine Empire was still going strong, but,
yeah,
and this is where it gets a little tricky, the throne in Constantinople was held by a woman.
Empress Irene.
A very formidable character who had seized power by having her own son blinded and deposed.
Mother blinded her own son. Politics in this era was just brutal.
It was. But for the minds of the clergy in Rome and Francia, a woman couldn't legally rule the empire. To them, the throne was therefore technically vacant.
That is an incredibly convenient loophole.
It's the ultimate legal fiction. They weren't creating a new empire. They were just filling a vacancy in the old one. As far as they were concerned, Charlemagne was the direct successor to Augustus Caesar.
So now he's got the title, he's the emperor, but governing this gigantic territory. I mean, that's a whole different problem.
This might be his greatest achievement, even more than the conquests, because the logistics were a nightmare. Information moves at the speed of a horse.
So how did he control it all?
He used a system of counts. He divided the empire into hundreds of counties, each run by a local noble, a count.
But how do you stop them from just becoming little kings in their own lands?
You check up on them. He created the Missi Dominici, the messengers of the Lord King.
Royal inspectors.
Exactly. Sent out in pairs, usually a bishop and a nobleman. They would travel around, hold court, hear complaints from the common people, and make sure the counts weren't abusing their power. It was a way of projecting his authority everywhere at once.
But he wanted to reform more than just the government. He wanted to reform the minds of his people. He wanted to fix literacy.
The state of learning was just appalling. The clergy, the very people who needed to read the Bible and perform the sacraments correctly, were often barely literate themselves.
And for a man as pious as Charlemagne, that wasn't just an administrative problem.
It was a spiritual emergency. He genuinely believed that if a priest mangled the Latin of the Mass, the sacrament might not be valid. Bad grammar could literally damn souls to hell.
So what did he do?
He issued a decree, the Admonitio Generalis, ordering every cathedral and monastery to set up a school to improve clerical literacy. And to do that, you need books. And to have books, you need a standard, legible way of writing.
And this is where we get a change that affects every single one of us listening to this right now.
It absolutely does. Before Charlemagne, handwriting in Europe was a complete mess. Different regions had different scripts, and most of them were very hard to read.
And they had this system, scriptio continua.
Continuous script. No spaces between the words.
Wait, what? No spaces.
Just one long string of letters. To understand it, you had sorted it out loud and sounded out.
That's incredible. It must have made reading so slow and difficult.
It was. So the scholars Charlemagne gathered, led by the Englishman Alcuin of York, developed a solution.
Carolingian minuscule.
A revolution in script. Clean, rounded lowercase letters. Clear separation between letters. And the most important innovation of all.
Spaces between the words.
The space. It's the game changer. It allows for silent reading.
What do you mean?
Before spaces, your brain couldn't process the text faster than you could say the words. With spaces, you can scan. You can absorb information visually, silently, rapidly. It fundamentally changes the act of reading.
And the look of the font itself, the actual letters.
Well, fast forward about 700 years to the Renaissance. The Italian humanists are digging up these old texts, copied by Charlemagne's monks. They see this beautiful, clear script, and they mistakenly think it's the original ancient Roman handwriting.
So they copy it.
They adopt it as their own. And when the first printing presses are built, the typefaces they create are based on that humanist script, which means...
I have a font on my computer screen right now.
If you're using something like Times New Roman, you are basically looking at a direct descendant of Charlemagne's font.
That's amazing. His impact is literally written into our world.
And the great irony, the tragedy of it all, is that he couldn't do it himself.
He couldn't write.
He could read. He spoke Latin, understood some Greek, but he couldn't form the letters. Einhard tells us he kept a wax tablet under his pillow to practice at night, but he began too late in life.
The Emperor of the West, saving Western civilization, practicing his ABCs in the dark.
It's an incredible image.
Let's talk about the end of his life. Succession was always the weak spot for these Frankish kingdoms.
Always. And Charlemagne's family life was, well, it was complicated.
Particularly with his daughters.
Yes. He had several daughters, and by all accounts, he adored them. But he refused to allow any of them to get married while he was alive.
Why would he do that?
Pure politics. Any son-in-law, especially a powerful noble, would suddenly have a connection to the royal bloodline. They could have sons, grandsons, who might one day challenge Charlemagne's own chosen heirs.
So he kept them at court.
In a gilded cage. But, and here's the contradictory part, he wasn't a prude about it. He allowed them to have affairs with court officials. They had children out of wedlock.
And he was okay with that.
He seemed to be.
Yeah.
He welcomed his illegitimate grandchildren. He just would not allow the legal political alliance that marriage would create.
He finally dies in January of 814. He's buried in his chapel at Aachen. And almost as soon as he's gone, the empire he built starts to fall apart.
It was held together by his force of will, his personality, and, let's be honest, his campaigns of terror. Once that was gone, it started to fracture.
His son, Louis the Pious, managed to hold it together.
Barely. But Louis's sons, Charlemagne's grandsons, they went to war with each other and tore the empire into three pieces with the Treaty of Verdun in 843.
And if you look at a map of that treaty,
You are looking at the birth of modern Europe. The Western Kingdom becomes France. The Eastern Kingdom becomes Germany.
and that's stripped down the middle.
Lotharingia. It becomes the contested ground for the next 1,200 years. Alsace-Lorraine, the Low Countries, northern Italy, the battlegrounds of European history were drawn by his grandsons.
Which brings us back to that title, Father of Europe. Everyone seems to want a piece of him.
He's like a historical Rorschach test. Napoleon goes to his tomb and declares, "I am Charlemagne." He saw the imperial conqueror.
The Nazis tried to claim him too.
They did, as a great Germanic hero, calling his empire the First Reich. They had to, awkwardly ignore the fact that he slaughtered thousands of pagan Germans.
And today, the European Union gives out a Charlemagne Prize for European unity.
Right. They celebrate the Charlemagne of administrative reform and common currency. They prefer to forget the Charlemagne of the massacre of Verdun.
But you can't have one without the other, can you?
You can't separate them. The unity was built on the violence. The Carolingian Renaissance was funded by the spoils of war. He was a man who could discuss theology with a scholar in the morning and order a mass execution in the afternoon.
The ultimate man of contradictions.
He was a bridge. Yeah. He had one foot in the so-called Dark Ages and the other foot in the beginnings of the medieval world. He didn't just accept the world as it was. He grabbed it by the scruff of the neck and forced it into a new shape.
And I want to leave you with this one final thought. We mentioned that something like 90% of all the classical Latin texts we have, works by Cicero, Tacitus, Virgil, they only survived because a Carolingian monk made a copy.
If he hadn't created that period of stability, that obsession with schools and scripts,
that chain of knowledge, stretching back to ancient Rome, it might have just snapped. The Renaissance might have been impossible. We might have lost it all.
it's a sobering thought.
It makes you wonder what crucial knowledge is being saved today, maybe by accident, by the obsessions of powerful, flawed people. If you enjoyed this look into the life of the first Holy Roman Emperor, please make sure you subscribe to History Titans. We've got so many more of these deep dives planned for you, and we really want to know what you think. Leave a comment below. Was Charlemagne a visionary? Great. Or was he a brutal war criminal who just had good PR? Let us know your take. We want to read your argument.
Until next time.